Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things cEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Ryan.
And I am your host, TK, and today we are going to talk about some of the most overlooked commanders of the year. We'll be taking a trip down recent memory lane and seeing what hidden gems fell through the cracks of this amazing year for Magic. But first, as always, we're going to talk about our sponsors. Which right now we've got a really sweet deal. If you were disappointed with your Black Friday shopping, don't worry, we got you. We have a special bundle deal going on throughout the month of December. And so if you pay $30, you can get $50 worth of product. That includes everything that we have on our site right now. Currently, that includes a playmat, sleeves, dice, coins, tokens, all of that's included. So if you got a nerd that you want to get some stuff for the holidays, go to playingwithpowermtg.com and pre-order yours today. You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, webcam league, playdays, early access to videos, names in the credits of our shows, exclusive videos, merch, and the ability to be on our episodes. There are tiers for everybody. So go to patreon.com/playingwithpowermtg and help support the show. If you're looking to sponsor the podcast, please reach out on the email below. And speaking of Patreons, we always do a shout out every episode. And today's episode is sponsored. Not sponsored. Bleh. Wind it back. You're
on the hook for this. The Patreon sponsor. Yeah. The bill will be coming. The invoice is at the end of the month.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for helping out. So shouting out today for our Patreon is Will Corona. Thank you so much for sponsoring. I keep saying sponsoring. You're not sponsoring the podcast. You're helping us.
Technically, Will Corona, thank you technically for sponsoring because you support us on Patreon. We appreciate everything you do. They do sponsor the podcast.
You do sponsor.
Thank you.
But, thank you. Thank you so much, Will.
The invoice is coming at the end of the month.
You have to pay for all of this, including the cards that we're talking about today. Thank you so much.
Which we ordered the foil versions of, by the way, just so you know.
All the spicy I wanted all of the glam for these decks. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's great.
So getting into the topic for today, overlooked commanders. This was a huge year for Magic just in general. Historic year when it comes to releases. There were 15 releases total throughout all of this year so far. There's nothing else really, right? We're at the tail end of it.
Yeah, I think Ravnica Remastered comes out in January, so that one's not going to be into 2023.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So we're wrapped up here for 2023, and so that's 15 releases, and that includes special sets. So things like the Jurassic Park insert into Exile, as well as like Tomb Raider, the Multiverse Legends, Commander products, reprint sets, things like that. All aside, so 15 releases. And with that comes so many cards. It's been kind of a point of contention right now of like how many cards have been printed. A lot of people are feeling fatigue. Speaking of Commander specifically, we have almost 400 new unique commanders that were released in 2023 alone. And when we're saying unique, that means commanders that are brand new. Not reprints, not commanders that we've seen before that got like new, cards or versions. No, this is 400 unique. I think the number is specifically 398, but 400 unique cards that were printed. That's insane. That's wild. that's so many cards.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That nearly 400 legendary creatures that could be built. A commander deck could be built around. That's a crazy high number.
Insanity.
There's been years when like 400 cards were printed in a year. Not just legendary creatures you could play. It boggles the mind. It really does.
Yeah, it's a ton. I guess going into that, what do you think about that? Like, how do you feel as someone who's been playing the game for a minute? Like, you have kind of seen the shift between, Wizards and Hasbro kind of going full force into Commander. as a product. So like, what do you think? Is this healthy for the game? Is this something that is a little too much? Are you fatigued? What's going on?
So I think that I have been playing since 1998, basically. So I've been playing just an insanely long time, maybe too long. I don't know. But anyway, that's another opinion. So, and I know everyone, and opinions are subjective. That's why they're opinions and not facts. The thing is that I think it is too much. There is pros and cons that can come from both of this. Oh, the year's commander product, that which is historically what it's been, once a year, a commander product comes out, it's 4 to 5 decks, and there you go have fun, commander players. And that was always, how it was done when they even did it at all. And it was good in the aspect that you didn't have so much product fatigue, but it was bad in the aspect of, if these commander decks didn't really, ring your bell or didn't really pique your interest at all, then you were just SOL. You just didn't, you had to dig through the release sets. And so in some aspects, it's good that you have so much more choice now. The whole, if you don't like it, go to the next one, or just wait 2 weeks, another set will be released, and you'll have something else to try. But to go into what else you also said, which was the product fatigue, I am. I'll profess it. I'm 200% fatigued over it. It's so much. Right. We're in perpetual spoiler season. We're perpetual release season. We're MTG ambassadors, and we represent the latest set release all the time. There is so much. There's so much that we're churning out in relation to everything that's getting released constantly, that it is a lot to keep up with. And that's because we're content creators. Now imagine the casual people that are just out there playing some games here and there and having a good time at the commander night and stuff like that, and now having to constantly read across the table the latest commander deck that was released, or the latest 20 or the latest 50. Like, the unique ones is 400, like you said. That's not counting all the commanders that were released this year, which I think were over 1,000, like some crazy high number. That number might be wrong, maybe I'm not, I don't know. But just, I guess my overall thing is that it's a net positive with an asterisk. So yeah, that's I guess the best way I can put it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think I am burnt out on product specifically. And I haven't even been, content creating in the same vein as you have for, how long. And so with that in mind, like, even outside of content creation, just as a consumer, being able to have all of this product in front of you, I don't think I even know all of the cards that came out in March of the Machine or like Aftermath. Like, I normally beforehand, I could tell you, like, card for card what was in a set because of the hype cycle that was all with it and everything else. You had so much time with these sets when spoiler season was coming in to really get acclimated to what was going on. Not just like with the cards, but lore wise, everything. I don't know what's going on in the story, nor do I care. I'm not jumping in. It's so much. And coming from other games too, from a competitive lens, I know back when I was playing, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon on like a competitive scene, one thing that was really helpful on those fronts was that you had two essential like release schedules happening side by side. So if nobody's ever played these games before, they have the Japanese card games, which are the OCGs, and then the TCG, which is the release that's everywhere else. And so because they're releasing at different points, you have the OCG that's released beforehand, like months beforehand. They'll get the set that is the counterpart to the set that you're getting. You can look ahead as a competitive player and see, okay, cool. This deck came out, 3 months ago in the OCG and it's doing well. We should prepare for that to do something similar. It's not a 1-for-1 translation, but we can prepare for that to happen similar, over here overseas. Magic doesn't have that. It's worldwide release. And so as a competitive player switching over, the fact that I have to look at each and every one of these sets when they're released and not even get time to really acclimate, like, there's no buffer for me to look and see, is this commander going to be good? Is this going to do anything for the meta? There's no buffer. I have to do it at the same time that everybody else is doing it, all while making content, all while trying to just look for other things for other formats. God forbid I'm trying to also keep up with modern, Pioneer, Standard, everything. It's not happening. It's so much. And it sounds like it, whining when you talk about it from that front, because it's like, it's more cards. But when you're looking at it from that lens, specifically from a competitive lens, that's so much to sift through and look at, what could be good. Because there's 400 commanders. Some of these could be hidden gems that really slap the meta and just nobody's ever given it a try because it's so much. So I can't agree with you more. I'm tuckered out.
That's the point right there.
Yeah.
The fact that there's so many things released that no one can actually really give it at something a fair shake to see whether or not it could be viable in any format, not just cEDH, any format. Like, how fast are people grinding through Pioneer and just realizing that they don't have the time to properly test the newest cards that come out because we're getting 300 cards a month. It's like an insane the amount of cards that we're getting all the time. Heaven forbid you're in a legacy format like Legacy or even the modern format or something like that with something like Lord of the Rings getting released then. You only really have the time to really scrape the surface before you have to move on because look, we're in another set release. Time to shift everything. I think that's some of the reason why some of these cards are just absolutely so overinflated. And, feel free to correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong, but something like Shieldred that is an $80 card right now. I know that wasn't from this year, but it's an $80 card. Yeah, its ability isn't spectacular, but we just don't have time to see what busts it. We don't have time to really brew anything around it that allows us to get beyond it in the 60 card. I mean, I don't know how in the world Shieldred to see in Legacy play when there are cards out there that do what it does and have been for decades that do what it does, but they never played those before. It's just when Shieldred suddenly dropped. This isn't a conversation about Shieldred. Please feel free to actually me down in the comments as to why I'm wrong and somehow this is the best card ever. I think really what it boils down to is that we just don't have time to really flesh out everything and see where everything falls. So everyone's just like, what's so-and-so playing this week? Oh, Shieldred's good. Everyone buy Shieldred. Just buy it because we don't have time. We have to get out there. We have to grind on MTGO. We have to go to our local FNM, and we don't have time to actually test anything out because so many cards are getting released. WotC doesn't care about competitive play, and we're going in so many tangents. I don't know what's happening. But
I think that's good. Yeah, I think you brought up a really great point. Like Shieldred. Well, by the way, Shieldred has Death Touch and is huge, so there's that. But
it's not that big. It's like a 4 or 5. Anyway.
But I agree. Even from the format that we talk about the most, cEDH, there are so many cards that can be put into a singleton deck. Yes. And there's so many options for text and everything else. And I just don't have the time to sift through it. And if a card doesn't immediately strike me as something that is going to be game changing, I throw it away until somebody else brings it back, until, I get a notification on my YouTube that says Comedian MTG just posted a new video. This deck is great. Cool. Then I'll look at it. But until then, nah, I don't have the time. There's way too much going on. I'd much rather just allow the meta to develop and then look from that point than to do the, what we did in the times of old and actually contribute to that. That's so much.
Yeah, and that brings us back full circle to what we're talking about today. The idea that basically content creators and, certain influencers and figureheads in the community, not just in content, but in anything, will say, hey, these are the best cards from X set. We literally did that in one of our podcasts, the top 5 cEDH cards from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Go look up there for a link to it right now or in the show notes below. But it basically was, hey, these people that we see as influencers or figureheads are saying these are the best 5 cards. You don't even need to look at the rest. So if someone like us are wrong, or someone like us overlooks something because we're constantly going through stuff, it might get completely missed. And then everyone's relying on that bias to say, hey, so-and-so didn't think it was a top card, or no, I didn't see it mentioned anywhere else. And it might get stifled before it was ever actually given its fair shake. And that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about some of the overlooked commanders from this year. There was a bunch of commanders this year, and I think some of them didn't get that fair shake. It didn't jump off the proverbial screen or the proverbial page when it first got released with all the 200, 300 other cards. So people didn't bother with it. And I think that this is a really good exercise for us to say, hey, let's see some stuff that maybe was a flash in the pan and maybe deserves another look, or maybe just wasn't looked at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And with a lot of the cards that we're going to talk about too, I know, earlier in the year, not too early, but I got into a point where I was fatigued with a lot of the formats because I was playing, like I said, Modern, Pioneer, cEDH. And I was like, I cannot keep up with the meta. I'm just going to play some stuff that I want to play. And so a lot of these cards that we're going to talk about, I ended up brewing and was like, okay, cool, just to kind of see what happens. And you would be shocked at how good some of these cards actually are, but nobody is giving them. I don't want to say nobody, because there are, the diehard brewers out there that are going to be like, well, I said, 100%, I knew this card was good. And it's like, yeah, you did. We didn't. So we're going to say it right now and, get that hype on there. But yeah, it's a lot of these cards are good. There's some really good cards that have came out. I mean, it's 400. You're going to strike gold somewhere. And so I was happy to, look at a lot of these cards and really kind of see some of the value that's there. Let's take a look at some of the commanders that we thought were overlooked. We can just go, bounce off each other. I know you had a couple and I had a couple, and just kind of discuss what these cards do. If you wanted to go first and, talk about one of your cards that you thought were overlooked.
Sure. So, and these are in no particular order. These are also, these are just what we think are overlooked. This isn't ranked. So like if we say one fifth versus say one first, that doesn't mean one's more than the other. So these are just some of the ones that, as we kind of look back over the year, we saw, I think this one probably deserved a better a shake than it got. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. And that first one that I'm going to be talking about is Rohan. All right, let me do that again. Okay, and the first card that I want to talk about is Rowan, Scion of War. Rowan, Scion of War is 1 a black and a red for a legendary human wizard. It has menace. It's a 4/2. And you can tap it, and it says spells you cast this turn that are black and or red cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you lost this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. This came from Wilds of Eldraine. And the first thing people might say as they're hearing me announce this was, wait a minute, we all had all kinds of buzz around this. What are you talking about? No, we were talking about reducing Peer into the Abyss and Ad Nauseum and all. We're doing crazy things with Crackle with Power. And I think we even saw it on one of your episodes. Yeah, you sure did. What happened? Where is it? Like, and that was the thing. It was one of those things that people maybe started to look at, but then, next set's out. Hurry, we got to brew the next thing. And Rowan, I don't think got its fair due. I think there's actually a really good deck here. I think there's the potential for a very strong deck here. I know we want to do the fun things with Crackle with Power and stuff like that, and lose 30 life and then tap it and then make your Crackle with Power kill everyone. That's fun, but this is actually a really good commander to just make your Ad Naus cost 2. Yeah, that's the real power in this deck, and nobody explored that. They were like, okay, the Crackle with Power thing or the Exsanguinate thing, that's fun. What's next? And they just kind of moved on. And I think Rowan, Scion of War is a pretty viable, or what could be viable, cEDH commander that we just didn't have time to really play with it before everyone stopped using it. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think that this card could actually be something. Even if it's not an S tier deck, I think it could definitely be up there with the likes of some of the other Rakdos commanders that have been floating around out there. Those Rakdos commanders are putting up numbers. They're not just tier 2, tier 3 stuff that's just relegated to the Swiss rounds only. There's actually some ones that are putting up real numbers, and I think Rowan could be one of them. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I agree. I think this is a card that like to your point, a lot of buzz was there initially, and then it's like it came out, and I think a lot of people did the exact same thing we do, or we're just talking about, where it's like, okay, cool, and now we have to move on to the next set, and didn't really give it its fair shake. The broken thing to me about this card is the fact that it's just how much life you've lost. It doesn't care about the fact that it's specific damage or, just like how you lost it. It's whatever life you've lost this turn. That's powerful to me because the amount of times you lose life in a game of cEDH is like a ton. Every fetch land, that's counting towards it. Every, effect where you're paying one or however, there's so many ways that you're losing life constantly that just can add up to degrees that a lot of people don't really see too often. And yeah, I think that this is a commander that really helps out. I always like the idea of being able to just go off a fat Atnaz and just draw all those cards. And all of those cards now cost like 1 black, 1 red, and then casting a bunch of rituals and just winning off the spot because what are you going to do? I can cast whatever. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to do. I think the Crackle with Power stuff is cute, but I do agree that there's a lot that has not been explored with this card.
Yeah, like tap it for 3, reduce your Adnaz by 3. Now it just costs 2 black. Rip the Adnaz down to 5. Cast Claim the Firstborn. Untap Rowan, and then tap it again to reduce all your spells by all your black and red spells by like 30.
Yeah,
like that's an insane synergy. Claim the Firstborn allows you to untap a creature 3 or less or anything, but basically, like, it's just a tap ability. There's no cost put into it other than the ability to tap it. But like this, I think there's just so much potential here, and I would love to see people brewing it and actually maybe taking it to tournaments or seeing how far they could take this. I think it's a really cool commander.
Yeah, 100%. And Rakdos is a really good color combination. You've got the progressiveness of red with like all of the tutors and all of the broken abilities that black has.
And all the life loss things are in black.
All of them.
Necropotents, all of them. Yeah.
All of them. And the burn, there's self-burn in red as well. So like there's so much you can do. I think it's definitely something that people should look at. Nice. Okay, that was a good one, actually. I really do like Rowan. Yeah.
I just thought you were going to bring garbage, Ryan.
I saw it on the show notes, and I was like, Rowan, we looked at that, and then you were talking about it. I'm like, no, you're right. Like, I didn't give it its fair shake for sure.
Yeah. It was, I think we took a little bit of a look at it, and then we just moved on to Lost Caverns because it was Lost Caverns time. We had basically 3 weeks to look at it, and that was it.
Oof. Yeah. Correct. Okay. Awesome. Well, the card that I'm bringing up right here is a card that I think a lot of people were excited about. And I think then a lot of people were unexcited when they saw the ability had nothing to do with landfall. And then I just dropped it. The card in question is Omnath, Locus of All. This is a card that came out in March of the Machine. So that was earlier this year. It is a 5-color legendary creature, Phyrexian Elemental, cost white, blue, Phyrexian mana, black, red, green, with the ability of if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead. And at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card if it has 3 or more colored mana symbols in its mana cost. If you do, add 3 mana in any combination of its colors and put it into your hand. If you don't reveal it, put it into your hand, and it's a 4/4. So yeah, a lot of people were very down on this card when they revealed that it had nothing to do with landfall. I thought immediately those people could not have known what Omnath used to be, and that it originally had nothing to do with landfall. It was just, you don't lose green mana. Because the original one was mono green. It was like, you don't lose green mana. And then I think it gained like power based on how much green mana you had open. So if you just tapped everything and just left your green mana floating, then it would be like a 30-30 because of how big green it was. And so I thought this was an amazing callback for just design wise alone, as well as the fact that it's 5 color 4 for 4 essentially, because you're never gonna tap black to pay it. You're always just gonna pay the 2 life. And having a 5-color commander, we've already seen how strong that is in our format. You know, you have Sisay, Najeela, Kenrith. Just having these really good 5-color piles is always just really nice, because you can play all of the best win cons, all of the best cards of whatever. And it's also this passive card engine, because even if you're not taking advantage of the fact that it's generating the mana off of the 3 mana colored spells, that's fine. You're still getting the card in your hand. And so, yeah, it's revealed information to your opponents, but I mean, so is Dark Confidant, and people keep trying to slide that into decks, and this has the ability to do that with all of colors out of the command zone, and the ability to create a lot of black mana too. Immediately my mind went to an ad nauseam. You make like a ton of mana at the end of your turn and then pass, and then your opponent, you know, you pass on there and you have all that mana on their upkeep and immediately ad nauseam. That's something you can do. There's a lot of cute things that can happen with like just generating black mana, because black just has really good tutor effects at instant speed, really good just loot effects at instant speed, rituals. There's a lot of things that you can do with that that I think a lot of people didn't give its due because it had nothing to do with landfall. And so to those people, I say, research the history of cards, because I think it's really good. What are your takes?
Basically the same thing. I think what happened was they said, "Oh, a 5-color commander. Ooh, a 5-color Omnath. Okay, we use unspent mana. Oh, okay, I guess. I don't know if I want to churn a whole bunch of mana into this." And then they start reading all the pre-combat main phase gigantic paragraph. You're like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to run a bunch of 3-color cards to get any advantage out of this. This card sucks." And then they kind of moved on. No. No.
Yeah.
Not only is this a 4/4, like you said, for 4, because you're never going to use the black pip that's not Phyrexian, you just get to draw a card for in the beginning of your main phase. Like, yeah, it's a revealed card. Oh no, Thrasios is a revealed card, and yet for some reason it still sees play, and you got to burn 4 into it just to get a card out of it. So it's not about, oh, I need to have a bunch of 3-pip things in order to get the mana. No, it's not about that. Sure, maybe if there is something that's super synergistic that you might want to throw 3 pips at, go for it. But you don't have to build that around it. You just get a free card and a 4/4 that, like you said, I'm going to dump my mana vault and, with a Seedborn Muse on the battlefield, because this is 5 colors, Neoform into Seedborn, or whatever you want to do. Not Neoform, but you get the point. Yeah. But it's Eldritch Evolution, do this into a Seedborn Muse, or even something like a Hullbreaker Horror or something to that effect. And you have crazy good options here. You have a 5 mana value commander that you only have to pay 4 to get on the battlefield. So you're cheating those Neoform effects very efficiently. And if you have something like Seedborn and you're tapping colorless mana every time, it's just becoming black mana. You're just storing up mana as you're going around the table with all of this mana that you have saved up. You could do so many different things with it. And I think everyone just got stuck on the fact that it was 3 pips and not landfall. And then they just stopped. And they were just like, no, that's too much. Oh, there's better commanders. Of course there's better commanders. It's always going to be better commanders. But I feel like this is definitely one of those ones that didn't get their due, because I think that this is card advantage in the command zone, which is always the litmus test that every cEDH player uses. Oh, is it card advantage in the command zone? Checks that box. Is it better rate? 4/4 for 4 in 5 colors, gets a card, saves your mana. That's pretty good. Why aren't more people brewing this? And the question is, next set got released. That's why. And so we all had to move on really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Aftermath came and everybody was just like, okay, and goodbye, Omnath, which hurts my heart, because Omnath is genuinely one of the best, I think, creature series that we've seen, ever. All of them are so much fun to play. Yeah.
And 100. Each one is unique while still being on flavor. You know, and it went in the progression of it over time. The one mana value Omnath from World Wake, which is the one you talk about. It's equal to the number of green in your pool. Then we got 2-color, you know, Angry Jellybean Omnath, I think is that one was, where it was like you create elementals and stuff like that. And it was really powerful. Then you had 3-color Teamer Omnath, which was just, oh my God, you're drawing cards and doing stuff. 4-color Omnath, we all know how good that one is. And then there was this one, and everyone was just like, well, what about landfall? I want the landfall. Where'd it go?
Stop playing with your lands. Play with actual cards.
I want my landfall. And everyone was just all sad that it wasn't that. I mean, I, as a little sidebar, when I looked at this, I thought the same thing. I said, this doesn't feel like Omnath. I was like, this just feels like something else. And they're like, oh, was Omnath this set? Oh, God. Just put that on Omnath and we'll just call it a day. It just doesn't feel like it. And maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe I don't know, but I still think it's a great card. And you're right. I love the journey of how Omnath has come throughout the years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to another one that I had. This one is Sauron the Dark Lord from Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. I know there was about 1 billion Saurons in here, so I'm going to read this one. Sauron the Dark Lord is 3 and Grixis, blue, black, red for legendary avatar horror. It is a 7/6. It has Ward, sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature. That's the ward cost. Okay? Whenever an opponent casts a spell, amass Orcs 1. Whenever an army you control deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you. I'm not even done. We got one more. Whenever the ring tempts you, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. Where do I even start with how good this card is? It's in Grixis, passes all kinds of litmus tests out there that every, cEDH player that only plays Grixis, it's a 7/6 for 6. The ward is absolutely bonkers on it. And it has whenever an opponent casts a spell, I get free resources through amass Orcs. Whenever an army deals combat, the ring tempts you. So it's either I get the tempted by the ring and going through all the ring tempting you things, or I get a free hit, or I remove one of their creatures because they're going to block it every time because they don't want to do it. This is cEDH. People play a lot of spells. You're going to suddenly have a 12/12 on your board after one turn. And then whenever the ring tempts you, you can discard your hand if you do draw 4 cards. Breach strategies, love the graveyard being full, always getting new cards all the time. Whenever the ring tempts you, like basically move to combat, discard my hand, draw 4. Sounds good to me. This card is unbelievable. And I think this card got overlooked for one reason. It costs 6. And I think that was a mistake. That people overlooked it because of its mana value. Because Tivit has shown us that 6 mana value commanders can be just fine in this format. Gone are the days that you got to wait till turn 4 or 5 to be able to cast a card like this. We have Jeweled Lotus, we have Mana Vault, we have Grim Monolith, we have Dark Ritual, we have Cabal Ritual, we have all kinds of rituals. The days of 6 mana value being our barrier is gone. Tivit's proved it. Don't try and at me with it's Time Sieve and all this other stuff is the only reason we're playing. No, we have plenty of reasons why this card would be so overwhelmingly powerful that you would just drown your opponents in advantage from the moment it hit the battlefield. You can't hardly remove it. You have to sacrifice your Mox Opal or your commander in order just to target the thing. And that's not even including me being able to counter it. Because once again, it's in some of the best colors in cEDH. I have no idea why people didn't start doing stuff with this. Because even when the ring tempts you, putting stuff with the different stages of the ring tempting you, which is like, to go through it real quickly. First one is Ring Bearer is legendary, can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Okay. Whenever the Ring Bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. So you got to loot on it automatically. Whenever it becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. And then the last one is whenever the Ring Bearer deals combat damage to the player, each opponent loses 3 life. So a bunch of these different effects from the Ring Bearer, but the one we really care about is kind of like the second one, which is not hard to get to. It's whenever your Ring Bearer attacks, you get to loot, draw a card, and discard a card. But like, this card is unbelievable, and nobody even brewed it that I saw. Maybe your local LGSs out there saw a little bit of play or something, but kind of from our spheres and stuff like that, I didn't even see it getting played in leagues. I didn't see it getting played in tournaments anywhere that I saw of any note. I didn't see it anywhere. So I don't know what it was, but I think if I had to guess, everyone saw the 6 mana value and immediately moved on.
Yeah, and to all of those people, I say you're hypocrites because people still play. People still play, like you said, Tivit. Corvald is still there. Atraxa is still there. There are big, beefy creatures in the command zone that are viable, always. And so to have something like this that you read out like an entire paragraph worth of things that it does. And the thing, sacrifice a legendary, I'm never doing that. Why would I ever? I don't want to do that. That's either my commander or something that I want on the board. Why? No. That thing can stay around for as long as it wants. And it's got Ishai on a body because you're making the orc army every single time. Like, I can't talk enough about this card. I just played a game with Ristic Buddies. So shout out to Steppen and Christian from that channel. Go check them out. And Steppen was playing this commander. And the amount of times that thing triggered to get the orc army to like a 30-30, and we were playing against River Song, so I was already low on life. I'm terrified. And you're making it your ring bearer, so now, like, okay, people are not blocking with it. No, I don't like it. And you're drawing like 6 cards because you're, wheeling and dealing. And yeah, sure, it's all going to the grave. That doesn't matter. I mean, Grixis, I want this stuff to go in the grave anyways. This card is cracked, and the times that I have seen it are very small compared to the impact that it has every time that it hits the board. And even if you're not playing it, let's say it is 6, mana, that's a lot. Maybe you're not getting it into, the battlefield at the time that the game's pace is going. You're still in Grixis. You can still wheel. You can still go ahead and play all of your, combos that have nothing to do with your commander that are still just good. You can still go for a Thoracle win if you want to. You can still go for a Breach win if you want to. That has nothing to do with the fact that your commander is just a value monster. I think this card is worthy of being a Sauron card. When I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. This is a broken card for a broken character. Yeah, I agree with everything he said. I think this card is a house, and I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, I won't even pay the Ward 3 with Tivit. And that's Ward 3. I could just pay that.
You can have that
sacrifice. You sacrifice a legendary artifact. It's never leaving the board. Unless it's something crazy where you're board wiping, of course, but it's never getting removed. And so you're just going to drown your opponents in advantage. And before you start to say to me out there, oh, well, that's not what we're looking for in the command zone, I implore you that is not the case. There are plenty of commanders out there that are just purely advantage engines that do nothing but overwhelm your opponent in advantage. You don't only have to have, card advantage only, which this card has, by the way, because you're cycling through your deck and stuff like that with the whenever the ring tempts you to discard your hand, all that kind of stuff. It's so much stuff that you can do. And like you said, it's still not devoid of the classic Grixis win cons and just your breaches and your Thoracles and all that stuff. That's still all in there too. But if you want to just go ahead and stomp somebody, or you get an unbelievable amount of advantage through the commander, you can do that. And it's sad that we compared it to the likes of Rograk Silas and said, well, Rograk Silas is better. We're not even bothering. I implore you to take another look at this one. I think it's a really cool commander.
Absolutely. I agree. Speaking of value monsters coming out of Lord of the Rings, one card that I was looking at is Aragorn the Uniter. Also from the same set. This card is a 4-drop. It costs a red pip, a green pip, a white pip, and a blue pip. Legendary creature.
Sans black, but yeah, that's fine.
I wanted to make sure everybody
You really
knew,
wanted to spell it out. I get it.
If I say sans black and people are like,
people know that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Ryan, legendary creature, human noble. No, you're good. 5/5. So it's huge. 5/5 for 4. With a wall of text that I will start now. Whenever you cast a white spell, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragorn the Uniter deals 3 damage to target opponent. And whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets +4/+4 until the end of turn. So essentially, you breathe and you get something for it. That's it. And I'm not even talking about the fact that, like, yeah, you're getting something off of, like, you know, you play, I don't know, Ragavan and you get to deal 3. Like, every spell that you cast is essentially multiple spells. Because once you count in the fact that multicolored spells also trigger this multiple times for each color that it has, this becomes insane. You cast something that happens to be all 4 colors, you get a body, you get to immediately, you can stack it however you want. And so, you know, if you decide, okay, I'm going to stack the white trigger here and the green trigger here, and then the red trigger, and then okay, cool. I get to make a body, immediately make it a 4/4. I get to then, bolt somebody in the face, and then scry 2. And whatever you played could be, I don't know, a draw spell too. So now you just scryed, you get the draw. Like, there's so much value for every single spell. That's insane. And immediately I think to stack stacks, being able to get so much value off of just your regular creatures. But this also could be a combo machine because you are in Tamer. So you can do things like Dockside loops into infinite mana, into certain outlets, if you wanted to. There's ways to get around that. And really make this your own. But I think just in terms of value specifically, the fact that all of my spells are now becoming either lightning bolt, some form of brainstorm, or, creating mono white weenies, like whatever, it's insane. And if you do multiple, it all stacks. Like, the green one gets huge because you can just keep giving the same creature +4/+4/+4/+4. And now all of a sudden it's like I cast the Finale of Devastation. Yeah. What are your? And it's a 5/5. Excuse me, for 4. Good God! So you can target itself if you want it to, and just swing and kill people with commander damage. Yeah. Thoughts?
This was actually one of the originals that was going to be on my list. Yeah. This was definitely a top contender for another overlooked commander. My first thought when I first look at this commander is I think it would be a fantastic stacks commander. We constantly say, oh, well, it's really hard to break parity on stacks, and stacks historically isn't as good for controlling the board in a cEDH game and all this other stuff. And we're not here to debate the merits of stacks, of whether or not it could be good or bad or what that's supposed to be. That's left for another episode. But basically, when you just play Rule of Law Tribal, and for every 1 spell you cast, you get 2, and everyone else gets 1, you're winning that game. Mm-hmm. I'm going to cast a Ragavan, and I'm going to lightning bolt the creature that would block it next turn. I'm going to swing with a 9/9 by just casting a Veil of Summer. Like, you're getting 2 spells for everyone else's 1 spell. You're automatically breaking parity. You're pulling ahead, and you're pulling ahead in ways that aren't insignificant. Like you said, you're scrying 2. You're creating creatures. You're giving them a big boost in toughness. And with multicolored spells, you can do both. Create the human and immediately make it a 5/5 or something like that. But these Rule of Law type effects that allow you to pull ahead, whereas other people can't necessarily, I think would be a place where Aragorn would really, really shine. And it's a shame that more people didn't look at Aragorn. We play 4-color commanders all the time. And I think part of the reason people didn't look at this with more was like, well, can I combo with it? No. Can I cast this with Jeweled Lotus? Not really. I'm done looking. That's too much. I can't see a direct line by looking at the commander immediately. And they just kind of shrugged it off. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think that there's a lot of value that can be brought from this commander. A classic example or a parallel that I would draw from Aragorn is Jetmir. Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. It's a Naya commander, and the only thing you have to do to overwhelm people with Jetmir is cast creatures. That's it. And you're winning the game. And you just overwhelm the board so much with all the power that it gives you that people can't outvalue you, and they just lose to your overwhelming resource advantage. Aragorn is the same thing. You're going to overwhelm your opponents in resource advantage, and that's how you're going to pull out the win. I'm not an expert deck brewer. Maybe Stacks isn't the route. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. But I think that there was a lot of value here that people just didn't say, well, it's not card advantage because it's a scry, not a draw. And I can't do X, Y, Z, so I'm just not even going to bother looking at it. And I think that's unfortunate. I think it's a really good commander.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought up Jetmir too, because this reminds me so much of Jetmir. It's insane. And with the added bonus of blue, so like even if you're not playing into stacks, or even if you are, you can play things like a fish or a Ristic Study, things that do give you advantage, and people play things that don't give you card advantage all the time just because of the insane other values that they provide. I think this is a card that was severely overlooked. And I hope people brew it, because I'm super excited to see what people come up with this. Even if it's not stacks, if it is something that's just sans black combo, I'm down. Sounds good to me.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Card Conduit. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I've used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them to get the best value of my extra cards. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have 3 main services. Their standard service lets you send them unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best buy list price for your cards. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half of the fee of the standard service and charge no fee per card. Their new sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. They give you the best price for your cards. They work with competitive buy listing partners, including ones not open to the public. Users get an average of 19% more for their collection than they would have from a major retail buy list, even with Card Conduit's fees. Card Conduit also optimizes buy listing for card condition as well. Since vendors have different penalties for wear and tear, Card Conduit will find the best buy list price against the specific condition of a card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the show notes or the description, or use the promo code POWER, you'll also get 10% off their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's podcast.
Agreed. Okay, so let's move on to my next one, and that is Lotho, Corrupt Shirriff. It is a legendary creature halfling rogue. It is a 2/1, and it reads, whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you lose a life and create a treasure token. Ryan, you might be asking, hey, people play this all the time in the 99, and you would be 100% right. It is a fantastic card in the 99, but I think people overlooked it as a commander. They're like, well, we don't have any good Orzhov commanders, so I'm not even going to bother. Be like, well, this is a pretty good Orzhov commander. Why don't you try it? And then what people do is some people started to brew it, which was really cool. But then they got cheeky and they got a little bit too much into their head. And they said, well, we should pair this with Lurrus of the Dream Den as the companion. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to sacrifice so many high quality cards just so you could put Lurrus into the companion zone. And they completely derailed the entire process. It's really unfortunate because this card as a commander, I think, is the number 1 Orzhov commander for cEDH. It is an amazing commander. It is an amazing deck. If you just stop getting laser focused on the brewing process and actually play it and iterate it, you'll see that Lurrus is not good in the companion zone. It's better in the 99. And then you can play things like Razaketh lines and things like that. Bomberman lines with Ariok Salvagers. You can do things like that with this. And it's an unparalleled amount of resource advantage, as everyone who plays it in the 99 already knows. So having that in a command zone that you can easily get out turn 1 with something like a Jeweled Lotus or even 1 0-drop rock, it's so easy to stumble into this turn 1 and just have 4 mana or more on your turn 2. It's just unbelievable how well it does. And the reason that I bring this up is because one of our members of Playing with Power, Zeb, champions this deck. And he champions this deck in this way. He said he talked to a couple of other people brewing Lotho. They all started to like push on him that he should be running Lurrus. And he had the sense to kind of take that information, absorb it, and then realize that that wasn't going to be his game plan. That wasn't what he was going to do. And he decided to leave that aside. And there was nothing wrong with him, nothing wrong with people giving that advice. And there was also nothing wrong with him not taking it. And he is so much better off for it. This deck is so threatening when he plays it. It is unbelievable how good it is because it's so unassuming. And before long, he's got a Smothering Tithe, 8 treasures, a Razakath in the graveyard, and is trying to go off with a Necromancy and a Saw in half combo and all this other stuff. And you're like, dude, it's turn 3. What happened? I thought this was Orzhov. I thought it was bad. This card is so good in the command zone, and people are not paying attention because I think in some aspects, they're stuck on their laurels and they're saying, well, it's Orzhov, so it can't be good. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Zeb was who I immediately thought about when you brought up this commander, because I will be the first one to say that Zeb told me he was brewing this, and I was like, why? Why are you doing that? This is
what's wrong with you?
Stop that! Stop! No!
Yeah, stop, Zeb! Stop it!
I remember specifically talking with Drake as well, another former, and was saying like, this is really good in the 99 in the command zone. Absolutely not. And then I played against Zeb, and then I almost lost. And then I was like, actually, keep going. That's really good. Especially because, like you said, it just grinds because he's always going to have mana. Because you're getting this out turn 1 consistently. It's a 2-drop, just like a Kinnan, just like, anything else. Like, you can get this out pretty easily. And so he's always going to have mana. Put that with the Smothering Tithe, put that with a Kumal, which is what he had on board when I was playing. And so now you can't even match him because you're dying as you're trying to play these spells. And he's over there just making all the mana in the world. It's a very threatening deck from experience. I give Zeb all of the praise for making it work in a way that I could not even see. And for that, this is a card that almost made it to my list as well, just because of that. Because I've seen it in action. It's a card that it just gives you so much value. Just mana, you need mana to play cards. This is a card that is going to give you mana. So yeah, I agree 100%. It's a house.
He plays it on turn 1. He gets to his next turn. He's on turn 4 because he has the mana to suddenly jump ahead in resources. So he just basically skipped ahead 2 turns while everyone else is developing their board. And you're wondering, like, how is he going off now? It's turn 2. It's turn 3. What is going on here? And you realize that people do not care about feeding Lotho. They don't care. And not so he will get 3, 4, 5 treasures in a single turn rotation. And suddenly you're on turn 2 and he's on turn 6. And then you wonder why in the world that you lost to it, or why in the world you're having to spend every resource that you can scramble together to try and stop him. And that's saying a lot for those who underestimate an Orzhov deck.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, don't mess with the Shirriff.
The Shirriff or whatever, however you pronounce it. I really wish they didn't do that.
Yeah. I was like, the Shirriff?
This is Shirriff.
Yeah. Another card that I think a lot of people were talking about up front. Guess what? It's March of the Machine. I apparently really am a champion of the set. It
was a good set, first of all.
Good set. Is Thalia in the Gitrog monster. Abzan. It's 1 white, black, green. So 4-drop, 4/4. Legendary creature, human frog horror. And this also has a wall of text, so I'll start that now. First strike, Death Touch. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And if that wasn't enough, whenever Thalia and the Gitrog monster attacks, sacrifice a creature or land, then draw a card. Yeah, this does a lot. especially in Abzan, that already does so much with the graveyard. Sacrificing something and getting a card that could potentially get you the thing that you wanted back, or, you know, for whatever kind of graveyard loop you want to do is insane. I know that a lot of people initially thought about this card in a stack slate, and I think that is the way to go. I just don't think people have given it enough look at, because there's so many. Stacks has had a great year, especially in the later half of this year, with a lot of these releases. Things like Dauntless Dismantler or something like that. It's the Ixalan card that we were all talking about.
Yeah. Dauntless Dismantler. Yep.
Yeah. You have silence effects now with the cat. Kutil. That's just off the top of my head thinking about what's recent.
That was just in the last set.
yeah.
That's from the set that's been out at the time of this recording, like 2 weeks. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And these are cards that this can, play. And a lot of people already play Tayum. It's something that I compare this to, but, you know, because it's very similar in terms of like how the creature works, but it has stacks on it. Your opponents you can also use this to kind of beat your opponent's face, because it has first strike and death touch, so it's not really going to get blocked or anything outside of that, as well as the fact that it is card advantage, and you sacrificing a thing for a card in this deck is not, and in these colors, is never really going to be a bad thing. Abzan always likes things in the graveyard. That's just how it's been traditionally, and so it's going to be something that you're always going to, you know, get advantage out of sacrificing. And I can definitely see you also getting the additional lands, which is really cool, with something that allows you to play lands out of the graveyard. You can still do Gitrog stuff. That sounds really cool. I like that. These team up cards are so wild to me, because they did a really good job of taking these aspects that made both of these cards that people love, and mashing them together in a way that makes the card feel unique and you can build it in a certain direction, while also bringing what made the other two cards great in full view. And I don't think that there's another team up card. There's one more, but I think we'll talk about it later. I don't think there's a better example than this one. It's shows like the Staxy element that Thalia has with the combo element that Gitrog can do, in a great way, in a great color combination. I think a lot of people stopped brewing this just because more cards came out. People had to look at what was coming up. I think if people gave this another shot, this could be a very Staxy winner if people were to give it a chance. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
So I think the best way that I always describe these team up cards, other than the fact that I think they're such a cool design space, I think they hit it out of the park personally with all of them, because there's a bunch of them. But they're unique yet familiar is the way I'd always put it, because like Thalia and the Gitrog monster, the mana costs are similar. They're combining their keywords. They're doing stuff that's familiar of each of them. It's such a cool design space. I want to say that first and foremost, because that needs a very high mention aside from what I'm about to say with everything else. Like Thalia and the Gitrog monster, in my opinion, I think was a really, really cool commander. And I think what happened was they're like, ooh, another Gitrog monster. Let's see how we can break the Gitrog monster with this, we're going to pull up this dredge land that escapes me now, that for some reason I forgot.
Dakmora Salvage.
That's it. Gosh, I couldn't even remember. I'm ashamed to be a cEDH player right now. I'm ashamed to call myself one. So yeah, it's like, okay, well, how can I make this work with Dakmora Salvage? Okay, well, it doesn't quite work that way. Well, all right. Well, that was enough for me. Time to move on. And it's like, well, hold on. Let's give it a second look. And there's a lot of really great effects on here. I can't tell you what a tempo swing it is for non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. You've immediately taken that game to turn 4 or 5. Because even the fastest decks in the formats drop 3 lands, they try and win quickly. Now, if you can try and power this out as fast as they can, that's the only race that you have to do. But once you've stuck this, the game has now started to go on your terms. It started to go in your pace. Your fetch lands enter tapped, and whatever you fetch for now enters tapped as well. That's an unbelievable tempo swing. And that's just the land aspect. Like, that's just the stacks part of it. Not to mention creatures also enter tapped. So like your Kiki combos don't work and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a real uphill battle the moment that this lands. You can swing with it with impunity every single time. First strike and death touch works so that whatever blocks it does not kill Thalian the Gitrog monster unless it somehow also has first strike, because it will deal its death touch damage to that creature before it has a chance to deal damage to it, and it will die and never deal the damage, which means you can always swing with impunity with this card because there is nothing that somebody can block that will ever survive, because it'll just deal the damage to it. So you'd have to block with like literally 10 creatures to even try and do something, and you're winning that game anyway at that point. But from a cEDH perspective, the stacks route, I believe, is a really good route to go. And not to mention all of the stuff that you mentioned with how Abzan abuses the graveyard. And this has a card advantage engine and a graveyard enabler built right into it. Now, granted, some of those things still have to end up on the battlefield before they do it, but that's not very difficult to achieve in these colors. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I think because people were so stuck on the idea of it being Thalia or so stuck on it being the idea of Gitrog, the fact that it wasn't just exactly those two put together was enough for them to kind of say, we'll look at something else. I think people should give this another look. I think that there's value in it. I know there were some people that were brewing it, and I think that this could probably be taken a little further.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the people who wanted this to be another copy of Gitrog, I say, have you ever played against Gitrog? I don't want another one of those cards.
Yeah, that's true.
That's so much for a loop. Just like, oh, well, I think I win here. Yeah, okay, just go for it. Fine. No, I'm okay.
Yeah, it's funny. All right, my next one is Narset, Enlightened Exile. This is a legendary human monk. It is a 3/4, and it comes from March of the Machine Aftermath. It says, creatures you control have prowess. Whenever Narset, Enlightened Exiles attacks, exile target non-creature, non-land card with a mana value less than Narset's power from a graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Okay. There's a reason I'm bringing this one up. And that's because a certain somebody took this all the way to the top 4 of the Mox Masters Invitational. This deck and this card is really good. And that person's name is Kai. So Kai has been notorious for being way ahead of the curve and having to fight through a lot of hate from people who are basically always trying to, for lack of a better word, stifle him. Not stifle the card, but like stifle his opinions. So he championed cards that back in the day people were absolutely, just saying, no, that is not a viable card. That is absolute trash. I don't know what you're thinking. This is no way. And now it's ubiquitous and sees play, and it's like $50 now. He is known for doing that kind of thing. And he took Narset all the way to the finals of the Invitational. Narset's a really good deck. The abilities are right there. There is no hidden agenda. There's no secret thing. There's no secret sauce, some special thing, some mystery tech through the 30 years of Magic that will suddenly catapult this deck, and he was the only one who knew about it. He just trusted himself and trusted this card to do what it needed to do. We've already proven that Jeskai is good colors that can be viable in cEDH, and these are amazing abilities that scale with the table. It says exile from a graveyard, not just your graveyard. Oh, I'm going to steal your Underworld Breach that you sacrificed because I silenced during when it was on the stack. Now I'm going to go off with Breach. Oh, I'm going to storm off a bunch, and then I'm going to attack and then copy my Brain Freeze for free. Yeah, I mean, and that's, I'm not even, this is just off the top of my head. I'm talking, we haven't even, it's not even scratching the surface of what this thing is possible and capable of doing. And yet nobody wanted to give it a chance for some reason. He gave it a chance, and he showed how powerful it really is. Now, hopefully with that win, more people might be taking a look at this card. I haven't seen it yet, though. All I know is that basically it took him going to the finals of the Invitational before he was finally able to say, see, look, this card is good. And that's unfortunate. That might be a lesson we want to learn out of all this, is we don't have to have it taken to the finals before we can see whether or not something is viable or not. You can always just try it. Kai did, and it did really well for him. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I am a huge fan of Kai's. I think his brain for brewing and just seeing the potential in certain cards is insane to me. It's always light years ahead. And I was able to talk to him very briefly at the Invitational about the deck. And the line of text that we were talking about was creatures you control have prowess. That's every creature. That's all of your creatures. And he's like, that's so funny to me because that's a line of text that, you know, when you read this card, it's probably not the first thing that you notice because you're noticing the combo potential. Or at least as a cEDH player, a lot of times we have we streamline into the combo potential that a card has and how do we win with it versus like what can it do in the meantime. Prowess is powerful, especially if you're getting buyback on all of these cards with Narset on the battlefield. Swinging with a Ragavan that's like a 5/5 scares the Jesus out of me. What are we talking about? Like, oh yeah, you played Ragavan and Dockside and stormed off with all those treasures, and now all of a sudden you're swinging with like, you know, a total of like 20 power. It's insane. So that's one thing off the top, and we haven't even gotten to, you know, its ability that everybody knows it for is the Exile mechanic, which one thing that I remember from, you know, casting the Invitational was a sequence in which we were going to Kai's turn. He had already attempted to cast a Final Fortune, which got countered, and everybody was like, okay, cool, we're good. Final Fortune is in the grave. He has Smothering Tithe with a ton of treasures. And I'm assuming tutors or ways to get to an Underworld Breach in hand. I was like, oh, I think this game is over. If we get back to Kai's turn, I think this game is over. And it's situations like that where it's like, okay, cool. We have to worry about when he's casting the thing from hand, but we also have to worry about when he decides that he wants it to do it again. And we also have to worry about, like you said, it's any graveyard. So we have to worry about what you're doing too. Sure, yeah, you want to go for your breach and we stop you. Okay, cool. We've just handed Narset the game if we can't do anything to stop it. I think this card deserves a lot more credit. I think Kai has done a lot for that. I know he has a couple of videos that really explains a lot of his choices. So go shout out to him. Go check that out on his channel. This is a deck that I personally tried to play test with, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's also fun just to be able, like, prowess is not something that you see often in our format. So being able to have these abilities that you're not going to see as much in these colors, you know, Jeskai specifically is a color combination you're not seeing all too often anymore. Is outside of like what Jessica Ishai is the big thing that I'm thinking of on the top of my head. It's
Elsha. Yeah, Elsha's the other.
Elsha as well. Yeah. It's like, okay, cool. It's really unique and it's fun. And I think that's something that we haven't talked too much about today, but I think is also important, is like, so often in our meta, we get stuck on how good is this and how can we win and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of decks end up being the same cores with just a different helm, you know? And this is something that's really unique, is good, and is fun to play, and that you're not going to see often. And I think that's all of that is enough to convince me to give it a try. And I hope it convinces other people to give it a try as well.
Yep. I think a lot of times, like you said, we get stuck a little bit too much into tunnel vision of, well, what's the combo of this? Because like, what did I spent my entire time talking about the combo, and I didn't even talk about the prowess. It's equally as powerful that people just don't even pay attention to because we get so focused in one direction. I think that a really good exercise that we as cEDH players as Magic players, quite frankly, is sometimes try to draw a parallel to what the potential of a card may or may not be. It doesn't always work, but it does give you a much better idea of what the potential of a card is. What if I told you that Lurrus of the Dream Den allowed you to cast something for free every turn? Would that make Lurrus more busted or less busted? Because Lurrus has more restrictions than this card does. And we play it in a lot of decks. Yeah. Lurrus is seen in the 99 of a lot of decks. And it's a very powerful card because it has inevitability built into it. Oh, you countered my Underworld Breach? No biggie. I'm just going to cast it again from the graveyard through Lurrus. Now imagine the same thing with Narset, except for I don't have to spend any mana to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to attack. Oh, you killed my Narset? Fiddlesticks. Oh, that's a bummer. Oh, here's my free Underworld Breach. Here we go, you know? And so having to counter something twice is really difficult. The other one I would draw a parallel to this with is how many people fear Dauthi Voidwalker. The idea that you can tap and cast something for free from a graveyard is enough for people to get super scared of a Dauthi Voidwalker, so much to the point where they start to politic around it. Quickly throw a counterspell in there so they'll be forced to use it, and they won't put it on this Underworld Breach or something. Narset has the ability of Dauthi Voidwalker just on the attack. It can only be a non-creature, non-land card, but it casts it for free. Cast it from the graveyard versus the exile, but a lot of those similar abilities are stapled onto this card, and we use those abilities all the time, and we think they're so overpowered, yet we don't really want to play Narset for some reason, and I'm not sure why, because it's all those effects are great. I want to see them in my 99 every day. I wish they were stapled onto a commander, but they are stapled onto a commander, so just play Narset.
Absolutely. Especially because even when you compare this to other versions of Narset too, that also do see cEDH play, this costs less mana and has more inevitability because I don't have to do top deck manipulation to do it, which a lot of people have to do with, Enlightened Master.
Elsha.
Elsha. Yeah, why? Don't even bother. I will just do it and know exactly what I'm hitting versus, trying to do top manipulation and everything that, and don't even worry about it. I don't have to play a brainstorm. So yeah, going back to March of the Machine, or specifically the first one, because this was an Aftermath card, if I'm not mistaken, right? Narset. Yeah.
Narset was Aftermath. It was that 50 card set where everyone lost their spark. So things that had been planeswalkers for years became creatures again, except for they were really good creatures. Like There's a lot of bangers in that set. Every card is really, really good. And it was overlooked because it was a 50 card set.
Exactly.
And I will also say I think people overlooked it because the packs were overpriced for what you got. I think they were 5 or 10 card packs, and I think everyone hyper focused on that and didn't look at what was in those packs. And there were cards like Narset. There was cards like the Nissa Resurgent Animist. Oh my God, what a card! I don't want to derail too much.
Yeah, is a house. But, absolutely.
But there's all sorts of bangers in that set, and Narset was one of them.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. But yeah, going back to March of the Machine, the not 50 card set. My next pick is Heliod, the Radiant Dawn. This card, for a lot of the lore buffs out there, were caused a lot of things because God got Phyrexianized, but he got robo-copped. But
I'm never not calling it that from now on.
He
got robo-copped.
Yeah. It was crazy. I remember everyone was like, how do you do that to a god? And I'm like, that's cool though, I guess.
I guess they did.
Yeah. But yeah, so Heliod the Radiant Dawn is a 4-drop for 4 for 4/4. It's a Wendy's 4/4. It costs 2.
Man, this inflation's killing me. 4 for 4.
Crazy. 2 and white pip. Legendary enchantment creature god. When Heliod the Radiant Dawn enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. Nobody cares about the front side of this card. And I think that might have been why it was overlooked. This card is one of the transformation cards. So it has 3 plus Phyrexian mana blue, so Azorius. Transform Heliod the Radiant Dawn. Activate only as a sorcery. So moving to the backside now, we have Heliod the Warped Eclipse, which is also a legendary enchantment creature, Phyrexian God, that has, it's 4/6, yeah. You may cast spells as though they had flash. All spells. And spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. I know that people skip this card specifically because it's one of the transform cards, because I did it myself until I played against this card. And I saw somebody have it in the command zone, and I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. You get to buy back your enchantments. And they flipped it and then wheeled. And that's a lot of cards everybody's drawing. And yeah, Azorius gets a lot of static just because it's like, white and blue. It's not necessarily, you got a lack of what people call like progressive win cons in it, and it makes sense. But just on value alone, to be able to windfall and then cast everything, at instant speed is really insane. Sure, like somebody can play an Orcish Bowmasters and now all of a sudden I'm scared for my life total. But you're in Azorius, there's a ton of ways to keep your life total up. And even then, you're casting everything in as, flash. You can just cast on top of the trigger. So yeah, it's really good. It's really terrifying to go up against because you don't know when they're gonna pop off, because everything it's all things, you know what I mean? It's not artifacts, it's not it's all spells. So sorceries, artifacts, mana rocks, whatever they need, they can cast. And so I've seen piles of this deck that are just wheels. It's like wheels and then payoffs and stuff like that to just combo on your opponent's upkeep or whatever, while everybody's tapped out. And so that's terrifying to me, because now not only, we're drawing all of these cards, but they're doing it in a manner which it doesn't matter. I don't have anything that I can do to stop them right now because I'm devoid of mana, or they're casting things in response. So it's like they're just comboing on top. It's really scary to go up against, and I don't see it nearly. It doesn't come up as much when people are talking about Azorius. People like to dunk on that color combination a lot. And I think this is one of those cards that when I do think about the color combination, I'm like, no, there's some gems. There's some stuff you can actually do in that color, combination that really can change the landscape of the game. Once this flips, all bets are off. And with it being 2 colors too, it's also huge for 4. To have a 4/6, it's good. There's a lot of things going for it. But I've talked a lot about it. I've gushed a lot about it. What do you think, Ryan?
So I think the reason that this card got looked over was kind of the stuff we've already talked about already, which is we see so many, it's hard to really deep dive into any of them. But the second one is what you said. Basically, it suffers from the Azorius problem. I want to put some very clear wording into this right now. The Azorius problem is the idea that there's not that clear win con thing like you had said, right? So here's the caveat. We have gotten to the point where so many things come out so often, and our cEDH is such an inbred meta where if it's not already proven, people aren't willing to give it a chance, that somebody will look at an Azorius commander, see Azorius and the cost, and stop. They won't try and evaluate to see whether or not, hey, this might be a viable Azorius commander. This might be the thing that takes Azorius to the next level. What's some of its weaknesses of Azorius? Is there a way that this can get shored up? I think they see Azorius, see that there's not enough win cons that make them happy, and they just stop reading. And I think this is one of those things that suffer from it, is that, well, what advantages can we do with this ability? Like you said, there's the wheel synergy, which is really nice. But how about just the fact that every single turn, your spells just cost 1 less. So your turn is just spent playing a land and passing. because every single spell now costs 1 less on every other opponent's turn. You can cast it in response to anything. Oh, you have a Rhystic Study? Oh boy, that resolves, because I want you to draw 3 cards to make everything of mine cost 3 less. And yeah, I'll fight you because everything of mine costs less. Yeah, sure, let's fight. I'll fight all day long for it. And these are the types of things that allows us to reevaluate Azorius in a way that we haven't been able to really evaluate before. Because historically, a lot of Azorius has been, if it does touch on these things, it's only in very niche kind of way. Certain commanders say things like, oh, your equipment and your auras can be played as though they had flash or whatever. And, or something else like that, little stapled on things that are a little too niche for it to be defining as what it could potentially be. This one doesn't have that problem. This one just says, hey, now you can just play the game at instant speed. You have a Vidalcan Orrery on the battlefield, rock and roll. And by the way, now your spells are going to start to cost less. And that is one of those things that if we reevaluate what Azorius is capable of and say, well, can we push it over the edge by the ability to go over top of somebody? Maybe there's something there that that might be worth exploring. And unfortunately, our meta is so inbred that we say, well, it's not Esper because it doesn't have black, so I'm not interested. Because it's only one more color. Whoa, what about black's really important? Yeah, that's great. It's only one color difference, and you're missing this, that, and the other of the win cons. And, oh, it's not a win con in the command zone. Oh, it's not card advantage in the command zone. I'm not even going to bother looking at it. And these are some of the habits that we need to start breaking out of. Now, before I go any farther, I do want to put one last piece into it. And that is, I understand. I know why we're doing it. And it's what we said at the very beginning of the episode. There's too much coming out. There are so many cards coming out all the time that we don't have a chance to look at Heliod and say, let's spend a month and really see what we can do with this. And that's the problem. It's basically we have to evaluate everything on a knee-jerk reaction or according to our heuristic that we've learned over the course of the years, because we don't have the time to evaluate them all. We don't have the time to give Azorius another look and see if there's potential there. Because guess what? It's another week, and now a new set of cards are coming out. And I think that's part of the problem. And this is a really good potential commander that I didn't even look at. This wasn't even on my radar because I did the same thing that you did. Well, it's Azorius. No, I'm sorry. I have like 6 other cards to look at this hour, and I don't have time to vote to this. And that's unfortunate because cards like this can slip through the crack as a result.
Absolutely, 100%. And I definitely implore people while we are entering like this next year, we do have kind of this sliver of time in between like Ravnica Remastered and things like that before what Murders is the next. That sounds wild out of context. Murders at Karlov Manor.
Murders are next. There's going to be murders in February.
Yeah. So take this time to really look at some of the stuff that came out in 2023 and really see and evaluate kind of for yourself. What do you like? What is coming out, that might synergize with these things? What do you think can be built out of these? Because Heliod is definitely one that I am excited to brew. It's something that I've been having my eye on for a minute. And once I do have this downtime in between, I will get a chance for sure.
All right, so the last one I have on my list is Borborygmos and Fblthp. This was also from March of the Machine. This is also one of those 2 that they crammed together. This is 2 Entimer, that is green, blue, red. It is a legendary Cyclops Homunculus. It's a 6/5, and it says whenever Borborygmos and Fblthp enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card, then you may discard any number of land cards. When you discard 1 or more cards this way, Borborygmos and Fblthp deals twice that much damage to target creature. It also has an activated ability of 1 and a blue, put Borborygmos and Fblthp into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. These are the classic familiar yet unique type abilities. It's like, oh yeah, Fblthp did that thing for the libraries, and Borborygmos was historically the discard a land card to deal damage commanders. And so 2 Entimer. And at first glance, it's like, okay, well, there's the card drawn here, but I don't care about doing this land thing from this. Depending on your meta, This card is actually really, really powerful. And the reason is that it's consistent removal in a creature-heavy meta while being able to execute a teamer-based strategy. A lot of times, if you want to connect with something that's in teamer, a lot of times you have creatures in the way. This gets around that. You also get really good card filtering while dumping out the useless lands in your hand as the game goes on. 2 in teamer is not that difficult to actually pull off in the worlds of Jeweled Lotuses and whatnot these days. It is not uncommon to see a turn 2 and turn 3 Borborygmos and Fblthp. And whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to immediately draw a card and then do the land thing if you want to. You don't have to necessarily discard anything. You could just draw a card when it attacks, because it says you may discard any number of land cards. If you don't have land cards in your hand, you don't discard. You just be like, yep, I'm going to attack and draw a card. And by the way, it's a 6/5. Good luck blocking it. And so this card is actually really good, even though at first glance, it just seems so vanilla. It just seems so like, it just seems like a casual commander. But for some reason, just how it gets put together is so surprisingly good. The last bit of text isn't completely, irrelevant. The idea that somebody might Gilded Drake it or somebody might do something to it, this allows you to get around those types of things, because depending on what you're doing with, drawing or doing other things with that, you can activate this at any time. It's a really good commander, even though at first glance it just seems so casual. And this one took me by surprise. And the reason that I bring it up is actually because one of our Mox Pro patrons, his name is Sean, he brewed with this deck for a while. And that deck slapped. It was really good. Yes, it was teamer good stuff, but it was that surprising ability on that was just mowing down everyone's fields. No one's commanders could stay on the battlefield. No one's anything could ever stick. And he was just controlling the table while still executing a teamer-based combo or a teamer-based strategy. And we just found out, we were just so surprised on how utterly good it was. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, Sean is actually the reason why I brewed this. I have this deck brewed actually back there in my library right now.
It's the study in the West Wing in your library.
Study. Yeah, in the Batcave, next to my Porsche. I'm just saying.
You must invite me over for summers. One even. I'll talk to my people. I'll be sure to visit.
Oh, but yeah. This is a deck that I'm playing currently, and I've actually got advice from Hire, who's also on our channel, about kind of how I want this deck to play. And I've been playing it at my LGS, and it is some of the most fun that I think I've had all year when it comes to playing Commander. Couple of things: you can just play Teamer good stuff. You can just play Breach lines and have that be a win con, and it's totally fine. You can also play Thoracle and play Food Chain, which is something that I've tried, because you can just create infinite mana with like a Squee or Eternal Scourge or Mist Hollow Griffin. I think that's the one, right? The blue one. Yeah, and just keep doing the ETB and draw your deck. Congrats, you win. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to kind of abuse that ability. I know Sean, when I played against him, he was using Ren in 6, which is one of my favorite modern cards of all time. And that's a house, because now, okay, you can discard your lands, and get them back immediately. And it's like, great, look at that. I didn't lose anything. I'm still making mana. Oh, my God. Or just keep them around if there's multiple targets that you want, and keep them in your hand if you need them. My favorite thing to do with this card is kill a Grand Abolisher. If you're not winning off the spot, that thing is gone, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's so much fun. And I enjoy Tamer a lot as a color combination. It's a good color combination. There's a lot of combos that you can do with it. And I think that this is one of those cards that I saw and immediately was like, it's vanilla. This is not even down to the last ability. I was like, there's no way I'm going to use it. And then you brought it up. I've used it plenty of times when someone's like, Gilded Drake, that's a really good card. I want that. It's like, actually, no one gets it. It's going back in the command zone, buddy. Have that. It's so much fun. And provides a lot of really fun ways to build Tamer that I don't know a lot of people actually explore, outside of like your Dargo Thrasioses and the, 2 people who are still playing Animar. Like, it's not a lot.
Shout out to you guys. Keep fighting the good fight.
Keep going, man. Ancestral Statue is so good, isn't it? Yeah, outside of those, decks, Tamer is not a color combination that I think enough people are giving its credit. I think green gets a lot of flack as like the singular worst color combination in cEDH, but it's tutor heavy. You can play things like Allosaurus Shepherd, which essentially makes all of your tutors like golden, and especially in a food chain deck, that's great because you need the creatures to really make that work. Yeah, it's a lot going for it, and it's some of the most fun that I've had playing, and it's a deck that I plan to keep around for a minute. So last card that we came up with here that I brought up is Agatha of the Vile Cauldron. This is a mythic rare from Wilds of Eldraine, so not too far. Legendary creature, human warlock, cost red and green, so Gruul. It's 1/1. And it has the ability as follows. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost X less to activate, where X is Agatha of the Vile Cauldron's power. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. So you can't get it for free, but you can get it pretty close. And then it has this activated ability of 4 Gruul. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and haste until end of turn. So this is a card that initially I saw, and everybody knows like her actual Cauldron is a broken card. It sees play in so many decks now, and for good reason. And I saw the card that she was, based off, that the Cauldron is based off of, and I'm like, this has some cool, cute things. You can make a lot of your dorks, the ones that cost, I'm thinking like Selvala and things like that. You could do things like that. And activated abilities just in general are something that you don't see a lot of play in cEDH, specifically because they tend to be expensive and nobody wants to do things for expensive costs. But this gives us a way to explore that. And I think that's really the thing that's worth mentioning to me, is the fact that you can explore those avenues off rip. Also, with the fact that you're in Gruul, infinite mana is like kind of the main way you can win. Thinking of things like Tamer Sabertooth Dockside or, other combos like that. And this gives you an outlet in the command zone to just win off rip with infinite mana. Which I think is huge. Like, we play Finale of Devastation and say, like, Finale of Devastation has this hidden, text that says, oh, and you win the game on it. This also has that same thing, too, and gives them haste, which is great. So, yeah, I 100% think this is a card that, for anybody who does enjoy Gruul, I know Chris on our channel plays Raga Draga, and this is like, I think a lot of the same cards that you would play in Raga Draga could see play in this deck specifically for a lower mana cost. Being 2, it's got that same thing that we were talking about with Kinnan and the other card that we were just talking about. It escapes me now because we've been talking for a minute, but 2 mana cost, you can get this out turn 1 easy, and really start to snowball advantage with those activated abilities. And being able to pay it off all in the end just with your commander makes that super sweet. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
This, I think, suffers the Azorius problem that we were talking about earlier. Oh, it's in Gruul colors. Next, and they immediately just like started to read it, saw it was in Gruul, and said, well, there are no good Gruul combos out there, so I'm not even going to bother. And I already talked about how that should be a re-explored topic and, with the Azorius thing, so we won't rehash it again. But I think that there is a lot of potential in this commander that people just didn't even bother exploring, simply because it was a Gruul commander. And it does Zerta of the Dawnwaker, Zerda the Dawnwaker.
The
It's been a
Dawnwaker,
day.
yep.
Yeah, Zerda the Dawnwaker's ability, as well as a lot of other abilities, and it does pretty good. You know, and those do see play in certain decks. They see play in the 99, granted, but they are still something that sees play. There are a bunch of different things out there that you can combo with Agatha. A common thing is like tappers combined with untappers, but the untapper has an activated ability. And so you can, you know, reduce that cost of that with Agatha. But people didn't want to explore it simply because, well, it's a Gruul commander and I can't do crazy busted things off the bat. So I'm not even going to bother because I don't want to have to maybe assemble a 2 or 3 card combo. Lotho, just going back to it real quick, is usually an ABC combo, and it has the advantage to be able to get there, and that's one of the powers of Lotho. But a lot of people didn't want to give it a chance because be like, well, that's not an A of an A plus B combo, and that's not card advantage. I'm not going to give it another look. I think Agatha suffers the same problem within our community or within our circles. I think Agatha could have some really good things with it because there's a lot of static, you know, abilities with activation costs that don't require you to tap that we've never even explored. There's a bunch of combos on the Commander spellbook. There's a link for it around here somewhere that you can check a look at. But if you just type in a commander or type in a card, there's a big database of different combos out there that you can use and that use those cards. And Agatha of the Vile Cauldron has a bunch of them with things like Pillapala and Paradise Mantle and stuff like that. And you can do all kinds of crazy shenanigans with it because it's reducing those costs, which would otherwise not break parity or otherwise. It allows you to cheat those costs in, and that's in your command zone. Now, I'm not saying that that's suddenly going to be an S tier cEDH viable deck that everyone's going to have to suddenly start fighting against. I'm saying that it at least deserves an exploration. And, you know, and sometimes when we do these explorations, they're not going to pan out, and that's okay. And I think people are scared of that. I think people are scared of being wrong. And because they have the chance of possibly being wrong about something, they don't even want to try it. You know, and then there's those outliers, and those outliers get shunned and, you know, made fun of almost in our circles, in our communities, which is ridiculous because we're all adults. You know, it's like you don't want to be wrong about Agatha of the Vile Cauldron. And so you're not even going to try it for fear that, you know, it might not be seen as a good player or not respected and stuff like that. Two things need to change there. One, we need to stop doing that to people. We need to stop telling people that it's not a good idea to try something or brew something or do something new. And two, we need to be able to give people the space to actually plead their case. Hey, I think Agatha is really good. Okay, great. Show us why it's good. Show us why there's potential there. And then we'll say, okay, great. That will be a good viable strategy for that commander. And maybe it won't ever be a tier 1 or tier S level deck. That's also okay. There's nothing wrong with a tier 2 deck playing at the tables. We do it all the time because we love it, because this is still Commander. And for us to say, well, it's not on EDH top 16, therefore it's not viable, that's wrong. Get that out of your vocabulary, because it's okay to have a tier 2 cEDH deck that swings in and steals 1 game out of 4, which is a 25% win rate, which is what you should be winning anyway. Be okay to fail. Don't be scared to be wrong. Don't be afraid to welcome those new brews at your table, and, you know, be welcoming to people and allow people to try these different things. And don't say, well, it's not Grixis, so I'm not trying, or it's not Jund, so I'm not trying. Get out there, get uncomfortable, and we can see how much bigger this format can be as a result of it. Agatha's a classic example of that. She might actually be really good, but no one's willing to give her a chance.
Absolutely. Yeah. If people can still play Winota up and down, I think there's absolutely still room for people to play decks that are not S tier. You know, I think that that's 100% fair. You know, explore, because every single iteration of a great deck in this entire game of MTG, not just in cEDH, took someone looking at a pile of cards and being like, actually, I think there's something here. And if we don't allow people to think outside the box and do that, we're going to get into these formats and these areas where things get really stale really fast, because everybody's going to be playing Roxai, or everybody's going to be playing, you know, Timnacrom. And then that's when we get people who are like, I keep seeing this deck over here all the time and blah, blah, blah. Why can't anybody be original? It's because you told the person who was trying to be original that their deck sucked or their idea sucked before they were even able to have a chance.
And so they left.
Yeah.
And now all that creativity is no longer in our community and it's in another one. And that person's flourishing over there. And everyone's complaining about Grixis all the time. And we're sitting over here saying, why isn't, oh, the meta's so stale. Stop pushing the people like Kai out.
Exactly.
Stop trying to force that person out all the time. Yeah. And we could get some really good and creative space in here and see some really cool stuff come out of it.
Yeah. Too long didn't read. Let them cook. Let them cook.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, there's enough space in the kitchen. Let people cook. And
yes,
it's not even. I think the worst part about it for me too, and I know we're going over, but like the worst part about it for me is that them exploring the format does nothing to your deck. If you love Roxai, to death, you can still play Roxai, even if I decide I want to play Agatha. Me exploring these other options does nothing to you. Just allow people to have fun, and really play how they want to play. That's the beauty that, cEDH was born out of anyways, was this desire to play how you want to play. And so allow that to be there for brewers as well, because they are going to be the ones that make, the next top 16 deck that you're all going to flourish to anyways. So you might as well just let them do it, because I know I won't. I'm going to wait for that next YouTube video to pop up, and I'm just going to look at the list and be like, yep, that sounds good to me. So just allow them to cook. Real quick, our question of the day to the listeners: what commander released this year do you think is underrated? Is there any that we missed, or have you tried any of them? Let us know in the comments down below, and make sure to give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. You'd be surprised at how much it helps us out here. And you can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, MySpace, all of the
Friendster,
yeah, AOL Messenger, all of them.
Our ICQ handle is in the description below. See how old we can get.
Yeah, we're all there playing with Power MTG. All of the links are in the episode notes. And yeah, that wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format in our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.